right, welcome back to another episode of the Self-Directed Podcast. Got a very special guest and a fun conversation planned today. Tim Chermak, founder and CEO of Platform Marketing. If you're a realtor, know a realtor in your life, reach out to Tim. He'll help you grow your business and you'll notice results. He's been working with realtors all over the country. He's got an awesome story and is living out, some of the part of the conversation that we want to get into today is this idea of constructing your life in line with your values and in living out kind of this intentional plan for your life, which is very much what the purpose and scope of Self-Directed Podcast is about. So Tim, welcome to Self-Directed.
Hey man, thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to just kick this off and hear a little bit more about your story, kind of how you got to where you're at today, but also like the founding story of Platform, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. So I kind of stumbled ass backwards into entrepreneurship. I always tell people I think I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, even from a young age. But I absolutely did not make a business plan, or there wasn't this, 5-year plan, or I didn't go out to a bank and get a small business loan. Me starting a business was not a result of like a high school class on entrepreneurship where I had to make a business plan and then I went out and implemented it. It was all very just winging it by the seat of your pants. And eventually somehow I accidentally built a successful company. So from a young age though, I think I always kind of knew deep down that I wanted to be a small business owner, entrepreneur. I mean, I was the kid where I'd have lemonade stands, and our family had a garage sale one year. I remember I sold chocolate chip cookies to anyone who would come to the garage, our family's garage sale, and my grandma baked the cookies for us. So it was pretty awesome having a zero cost of goods because I could just sell these cookies for whatever it was, 50 cents a piece. And it
infinite
was all
margins.
Yeah, exactly. It was all profit. And I had, obviously I was 5 years old at the time. So I had no concept of profit margin or anything like that. But I think I made around $10 that day. It was like something like that. I mean, I don't know if it was 8 or 15, but I seem to remember it was about $10, which when I was like preschool, kindergarten age, I mean, $10 is like a small fortune, So I was making like retirement plans and calculating, how long can I live off of the passive income of this $10 that it'll kick off in dividends. I was just balling,
Yeah.
And I think I got addicted to that at a young age, this feeling of like, I can go out and earn money on my own by exchanging something I have. In this case, it was a product, but a product or service, and people are willing to pay me money. And that was just like a shot of adrenaline and a shot of self-esteem for a young kid to experience that. Like, wow, people will actually pay me money. Like, I don't have to be Walmart. I don't have to be Target. I don't have to be this like legitimate physical retail store with thousands of employees and billions of dollars. Like, I can just think of something, and if people want it, they might actually pay me money for that. And I know that sounds really elementary, but the younger that you learn that, or the younger the age you are, when that first really hits you, where you like get it deep down, it's like, that was a really cool feeling. And I still remember it to this day. And so when we would do like fundraisers at school where we'd sell magazines door to door to raise money for the school, or we'd have like chocolate bar sales. That was another one we did where, you'd go door to door selling these overpriced $5 chocolate bars, and the neighbors know it's for school, for charity or whatever. So they'd buy a couple chocolate bars, and then the classes would always keep track of who's the top salesperson. And then they'd give you some award, and like every year we did that, I was always the top salesperson in my class. Whether it was chocolate candy bars, selling gold cards in high school sports, selling magazines, I mean, all the above. When I was, I don't know, like second or third grade, somewhere around there, I started mowing lawns. I would go find golf balls at the nearby golf course, and I'd polish them up and sell them back to the golfers. Or I had a stand, on like the nearest green to our house growing up. I mean, anything I could do to find a way to like sell my services or a product and make money, I would do that. And it felt amazing. And in high school, eventually, I started getting my first W-2 jobs, where I think my first job that it was like a legal paycheck. I was probably 14 or 15. Cause I remember I wasn't yet even old enough to drive to my job. My mom had to drive and drop me off because I didn't even have a driver's license yet. And I was working in the local mall at like a Sears, making like $5 something an hour. This is back when you could pay someone $5 an hour.
Yeah.
And they would promise, yeah, you can make more money though with sales commissions if you sell the big ticket items like big screen TVs and plasma TVs were all the rage back then. And they cost, like $3,000. And it's like, well, not a lot of people are going to be buying a $5,000 TV from like a 15-year-old kid. So those commissions did not happen. I hardly made any money at that. And I remember thinking, even at a young age, thinking like, this is a bad trade, trading my time for $5, because this is back when I was in high school, gas was like over $4 a gallon. And so I'm like doing quick math. I'm like, after all the taxes are taken out of your paycheck, it's like every hour I work buys me a gallon of gas. And when my shifts are only 4 hours long, because I'm coming in after school and working from like 4 to 8 type thing, it's like, I'm barely making enough money just to drive there and back, once I got my driver's license. And so I think I kind of realized from an early age that I didn't really want to go the rest of my life selling my time for money. Just because that's not super, super scalable if you want to make a lot of money. I was also one of the kids where I think pretty early on, I accepted like, I want to make a lot of money and I'm not ashamed or embarrassed of that. I just know that's what I want to do. Some people, whatever, they want to be a teacher and they just deep down know, I want to work with kids for the rest of my life. I want to be a teacher. That's awesome. Some people know they want to be a scientist and that's what they want to do. They're fascinated with chemistry or biology or whatever. I was one of those kids where from a young age, I just loved making money. It was thrilling to me in the way that maybe sports is thrilling to some other people. And I played sports too. I was a normal kid. I wasn't some weirdo who was constantly scheming up business models at age 5 or something. But, I knew from a somewhat young age that I like entrepreneurship. This is fun. This is what I saw my family do too. So I think culture has a very big part to do with this. I mean, my dad was a small business owner. My mom was. They started businesses together as I was growing up. All of my aunts and uncles were small business owners. My grandpa was on both my maternal and paternal side. So, I mean, going back generations, both sides of the family.
You were joining the family business.
Yeah, I mean, literally everyone was a small business owner. So it felt very normal to me that, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm, get older. I just need to find what type of business it is and where that, Venn diagram intersects with something I'm good at and something I somewhat enjoy and something that people are willing to pay money for. So, I knew from a young age, I think this is what I want to do, but I think I was 21, 22 years old, something like that. And I dropped out of college. Parents were absolutely devastated that I was like in my senior year and I dropped out. And my dad was really devastated because my dad grew up very, very poor. My mom was pretty solid middle class, even upper middle class growing up. So her family didn't have a need for money or anything. She didn't grow up super rich or anything like that, but she was able to go to college and her parents helped her with the cost of school and everything. And she got like an education degree and she ended up being an accountant. So a pretty typical middle-class career. That's what my mom did before she met my dad. My dad, however, grew up extremely poor, like very, very poor. Not as in like, they didn't have quite as much money as other kids. It was like, no, they are the poorest family in the entire school, maybe the entire school district. He never had any of his own clothes that weren't hand-me-downs until he basically left the area and joined the Navy. I mean, all of his clothes were hand-me-downs. He tells me stories about growing up. Like we didn't have toilet paper. We couldn't afford toilet paper. So we'd rip out the textured pages at the back of the Sears Roebuck catalog and use those to wipe our butts when we were younger. He always shared bedrooms, even beds with his younger brothers growing up. I mean, very poor, no money whatsoever. So that was kind of the consciousness or context that my dad grew up with. And he worked super hard, started small businesses, failed at a bunch of them. And eventually one of them worked out. It was a staffing service, which is, a service-based company, right? Where you match people with jobs. They would contact their niche in the area was he contacted like smaller agricultural operations and light manufacturing companies in the area where he kind of identified the sweet spot where keep in mind, my dad didn't go to business school, doesn't know anything about anything related to business. He winged it too. He just kind of searched for opportunities and found something, right?
Yep.
But so he just went around to these companies and he identified there was a sweet spot where it was these light manufacturing companies and, kind of small family owned agricultural operations where it's not massive corporate farms, but it's also not like a hobby farm either.
Yep.
And he identified there was this market niche where some of these organizations are large enough to where they need help finding workers, but they're way too small to justify having an HR department or even like one full-time or even part-time person working on HR, but they absolutely need help with it.
Yep.
So he said, hey, I can serve this niche because I can kind of be their de facto, HR department, help them find people. And the staffing service business model, is born from that. So he started this company and ended up being successful. But I mean, he was the one often going out to job sites early on where he would, go into the really rough areas, poor areas of town. And he would literally go door to door knowing that, hey, these are the rough areas of town. There's probably a 50% chance if I knock on this door, someone in this house is unemployed.
Yeah.
And maybe I can offer them a job and they'll take it. So he was going into like dangerous, sketchy, rough areas of town. I mean, going door to door saying, hey, does anyone here need a job? We're hiring. We can get you a job today if you're willing to show up today or first thing tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. type thing. And so he did that, built this business from the ground up. My mom handled all the accounting and bookkeeping because if my dad was left to do that, like we'd all probably be in a federal prison because he has no idea how to pay taxes or manage the books on anything, So she's handling all the business side of it. He's out kind of the salesperson going out and getting clients. And so that business ended up working out. My dad eventually became a millionaire in his 50s because of that, after basically having no money the first 50 some years of his life. Finally becomes a millionaire just the old fashioned way. Starting a local small business. It wasn't a big VC software company or something, right? I call it the old fashioned way of becoming a millionaire. And so that was my model growing up of what I saw. Like, keep in mind, my dad didn't have a business degree. He actually dropped out of high school. So he not only didn't have a college degree or an MBA or anything like that, doesn't even have a high school diploma. And so I figured like, well, this can't be that hard. I'll just go be a small business owner. So that was not what my dad wanted though. He worked really hard so that he could see his kids grow up and not have the struggle and adversity that he had growing up. So it's very much an issue of deep personal pride for him that he's thinking, I'm going to bust my ass. I'm going to work hard so that my kids don't have the childhood that I had. It's this classic, I want to give them opportunities I never had. So he's thinking, hey, my son Tim's really smart, gets straight A's. He's going to go to, he'll graduate high school and, he'll go off to college and then he'll probably become a doctor or a lawyer. I mean, pretty much every year in high school, my parents were like, you should probably go become a lawyer. You'd be really good at that. You're good at arguing and you're good at writing and you're a logical thinker. And they're like, you should go be a lawyer. And so when I decided to drop out my senior year, because I'm just fed up with college, I'm one of those kids where it's like, early on, I started questioning, like, why am I writing papers about this? I'm never going to have to know information about the 100 Years War again or the 7 Years War. Why am I studying like mid-Asian 13th century history or English literature or even like college level biology and chemistry? Because I know I'm not going to go be a scientist. Why am I having to study this, memorize it for the test, knowing I'm forgetting it within 24 hours of taking the test? And so that just got really, it became a drag on me mentally, like it does for many people. Because especially if you're entrepreneurially wired, right? You have a very sensitive bullshit radar. I think if you're entrepreneurially wired, you are more sensitive to realizing when is work being done for work's sake versus is value actually being creative here. And that's almost a tautology because it's like by definition, what makes you an entrepreneur is that you're very sensitive to opportunity cost. You're just more sensitive to opportunity cost than other people are. So I'm sitting in these classes and I'm thinking like, what am I doing here? If I want to start a marketing company or start some sort of small business, I can just go do it. I don't need to take another 200 level accounting class, or I don't need to take an HR corporate compliance class because none of the stuff is relevant to what I want to do anyways. And so I just dropped out my senior year and I started a marketing agency. And when I say I started a marketing agency, that meant that I just started going door to door to local small businesses in town, asking them if they needed help with marketing, asking, usually I would say, hey, I would stop in unannounced and I would be dressed somewhat nice, not like super weird wearing a suit or anything, but I would tuck in a button up shirt and I would walk in and it could be a used car dealership I walked in on. I remember a couple financial advisors, a couple real estate brokers walked into their office, natural health stores, even a gas station convenience store, pizzeria in my hometown. So all sorts of just any local brick and mortar random business, a CrossFit gym. I remember I would just walk in and say, hey, could I talk to the owner?
Yeah.
I have a couple marketing ideas I'd like to run by them, just unannounced. I'm like, 21 years old. And usually they're kind of like, oh, okay. And the front desk person says, yeah, let me schedule a meeting. Maybe tomorrow you can come back at 2:00 or whatever. And so all I would think of this first little interaction is I'm just trying to get permission to come back and actually have a real meeting. Right.
Yep.
And then I would do a bunch of homework before that meeting. And I would just try to type out a 1 to 2 page report. So I'm not like coming in with like a 50-page analysis that I know they're not going to read anyways, but a 1 to 2 page report of how I think I could help the business and some marketing ideas that we could implement. So I'm basically giving them the marketing ideas for free, knowing that they're not going to have time or the know-how to implement this on their own. If they really are impressed by the ideas, they'll have to hire me to implement them.
Yeah.
Right. But I basically give them the ideas. And I probably pitched 10 different businesses on what I would do for them. And a lot of this was like analog offline. So when I was 21, this was real. I mean, this obviously like the internet existed and everything, but this was really before Facebook ads or YouTube ads were a thing. And so that's how we've built our business up now is social media ads for realtors. We do a lot of, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, but this was before any of that. So almost all the ideas I'm pitching them on.
Grounded pound.
Yeah, it was just like
door to door.
Here's some local marketing ideas I think will work. And, some of it's like building an email list and email marketing because that existed back then, but that was even still in its infancy. I mean, that was back when you'd send out an email and if you didn't get a 50% open rate, you were doing something wrong, And so I did that. The first like 10 said no. Maybe it was even the first dozen. It was something like that, said no. Like the car dealership even like yelled at me and told me to leave them alone and not come back because I had gone there multiple times to like, hey, can we talk about marketing? Please get out of here. I don't want to talk to you. And so I just faced rejection over and over again. Eventually I was connected with a realtor. And this realtor had no business whatsoever. I mean, she was broke. She used to be a decent realtor during the housing boom, but then when all that crashed, she kind of realized like, I don't have any marketing systems. I was just floating on the strength of this housing boom. And so she had zero business to speak of. And she's like, I guess I'll hire you, but I don't have money to hire you. But if somehow you can help me grow my business, I'll give you a percentage of profits because I know that any business growth is because of you. Because right now I have zero.
Yeah.
So things were so bad, to put this into perspective, that the first house I helped her sell was her own house because she couldn't afford to live there anymore. And the bank was about to foreclose on her own house because she was behind on the mortgage payment. So that's how bad things were for her. Like a realtor about to be foreclosed on by a local bank, which is like obviously in a somewhat smaller town, incredibly embarrassing because word will get out that you lost your own house to the bank as a realtor. So that's how bad things were for her. So she knew that if her business grows at all, it's because of me.
Yep.
So we started doing some marketing. I owned a video camera back then. That was like the one hard skill that I actually had. I didn't know Facebook ads or YouTube ads because none of that even existed then, but I did know how to film basic videos, splice them together in a video editing software and upload them to YouTube. That was about the extent of my like technical skills, I guess you could say. So I just realized, well, no one here is doing this. No realtors are putting anything on YouTube. And so what we did is we would film videos of her listings. I would upload them to YouTube. And then we'd also post those videos on Facebook. And we created some basic opt-in landing pages where it's like, hey, if you want to, here's a quick preview of this house or of this listing. Yep. But if you want to watch the full video, opt in here and I'll email you the video tour link because we needed some mechanism to capture people's contact information, grab their names and emails. And so we started doing that, and her business blew up. And within a couple of years, I mean, we probably added $250,000 to her GCI, which is just a fancy industry term for GCI. What is that? Gross commission income.
Yeah.
Basically just like what a realtor will say is, how much money did I make last year? What was your GCI? If someone says 200, it means they made 200 grand last year. So I basically took this realtor from making quite literally statistically zero to over 200 grand. And so she had agreed to pay me 25% of everything that came in. So I'm this young whippersnapper. I'm probably 22 by now, something like that. And making, basically the equivalent of 50 grand a year just because I'm getting a quarter of her business. Well, her broker also happens to be apparently the president of the Minnesota Board of Realtors. And he catches wind of this because obviously she was like one of the lowest performing agents in the entire brokerage in the state of Minnesota. And all of a sudden now she's one of the top agents in the entire brokerage in the entire state of Minnesota. In like just a year, basically all this happened. And he's like, what did you do? Like, what changed? And she's like, oh, I started working with this marketing kid and he's helping me with my online ads and, whatever. And then I get a phone call from the president of the Minnesota Board of Realtors. And he's like, hey, I love what you're doing. It's so cool that you're ambitious and everything. And you're, what the marketing that you're doing is working, but I need to tell you to stop unless you get licensed as a real estate agent, because it's illegal to collect a percentage of commissions unless you're actually licensed. So he's like, I'd love to have you get licensed and you can even join this brokerage and we can bring you on. And he was basically like simultaneously offering me a job, but also offering me a career there to be an agent and a marketer. And I was just like, I have absolutely no interest in doing that, so we crafted kind of like a handshake, wink, wink deal where I would send her invoices every month for marketing. And they just always corresponded to be with the hourly rate calculated. The amount of money I was getting always happened to be about a quarter of her income, but it wasn't literally getting a percentage of commissions anymore. And so she referred me to a couple people because now the president of the Minnesota Realtors knew about me. He referred me to a couple people. Those people referred people to me. And all of a sudden I had like a stable of kind of like a dozen clients. And I eventually decided to start charging $1,600 a month. And so I was making pretty serious money for a young kid in my low 20s. At some point along that way, I think it was about a year or two into it, I approached my cousin as well, and he was a software developer. And I said, hey, there's really nothing in the industry from a marketing software perspective that does what I need it to do. So I was kind of like jerry rigging, trying to make, Wufoo forums work with MailChimp, work with lead pages, using APIs and, on everything, just hoping that the plugins don't break.
Yeah.
And that the follow-up emails are being sent to the right people and everything. And I said, could you just help me build an inline marketing campaign system that allows me to build a landing page, a thank you page, and simultaneously send follow-up emails and text messages from the same system. And then also it would double as a CRM. So I don't have to use like one marketing software to build the landing pages, but another one to actually track the leads. And so I worked with him to build that, and we went in on it 50-50. And the idea was like, well, I'm going to have to pay you to develop this anyways, or I have to keep using all these softwares. So let's just start a side business together. We'll be 50-50 partners on it. And if we get more people who want to use the software, we'll split the profit of that 50-50. So as I'm building this marketing agency, simultaneously, we're kind of building a marketing software company on the side. And so we just kept getting referred clients. And again, I had no business plan. I never intended to work with realtors, but it just happened that I got this agent amazing results.
Yep.
And then they referred a bunch of people to me, and those people referred people to me. And now we have about 180 clients around the country. We have a team now of over 20 people that manages all those agents' marketing, builds the campaigns, edits their videos, sets up all of the retargeting. We still have that software to this day that we work with, that we built, about 8 years ago now. And business is really good. Our clients get really great results, and we only work with one realtor per area. So that's kind of our niche, is that unlike all the other companies out there who will take an unlimited amount of agents, like, hey, if you have a credit card and a Pulse, you can sign up,
Yeah.
We will.
Now they're competing against everybody in the same market.
Yeah, exactly. We'll only take one realtor per market area. So that's kind of what makes us unique. And so things are really good because we have that policy. our clients get really good results. And I mean, I actually just closed a sale this morning of a new realtor who wanted to sign up for our program. Like right before we hopped on this podcast, I was closing up a sale, and it's pretty easy to onboard new people and sell new people when I can actually honestly tell him on the phone that, yeah, it's a pretty typical result that when someone signs up with us, if they're a realtor, we can double their business.
Yep.
It's not something that you sign up and, hey, maybe you might grow by 10% or something, or 20%. It's like, no, we can probably help you grow your business by like 100%, or, we can double your GCI if you join our marketing program. And so if their market is available, it's pretty easy to get someone to sign up. So yeah, things are going well, but I think it always comes back to, are you actually really good at what you do? And are you offering a specific skill set that's at least somewhat rare that people can't easily get somewhere else? Because I mentioned this kind of like, seemingly irrelevant detail in that story that, yeah, at the time, I was 20, 21, and I just had a video camera I had bought, and I knew how to film videos and splice clips together. I was no means like a Hollywood film producer quality, so like there was a lot of hobbyist video people that now use like DSLR type cameras that are probably way better than I ever was. So I don't want to imply that I was like this like expert filmmaker and, future director or cinematographer or something. I basically just knew how to set up a camera, hit record, frame the shot in a non-stupid way, and then splice the clips later in such a way that it looks like someone who sort of knew what they were doing edited the video.
But the big point that you attach to that is, even if you weren't the best, director level quality or whatever, nobody else was doing it.
Yep, totally. And you have to have at least some specific skill set to get going, I think. So when I look back, what that skill set was I knew the basics of how to edit video. So I'd gone out and I bought like the nicest camera I could afford, which back then I think the camera I bought was like $2,500 or something like that. And I filmed a couple weddings and did a couple random small videos for local businesses that would pay me like $400 or $500 to make a cool promo video for them, and eventually I paid it off. So I owned this camera free and clear. And like, it's funny in hindsight, I'm not making this up at all, but I picked the camera based on like how physically long is the lens. So how far does it telescope out? Because the bigger the camera looks and the longer the lens is, the more clients are impressed when I would show up with it. Because it makes it look less like a personal handy cam that your dad might have to film your flag football game type thing. So like I literally picked my camera, not because I knew anything about f-stops or anything about low light capabilities, or I still to this day, I'm not an expert on that stuff. I picked it because I watched some of the footage on YouTube. And I'm like, hey, the footage from that camera looks like it's capable of gathering pretty decent quality footage. But the main thing was like, ooh, that lens goes out to like 200 millimeters. So it really extends really far. So if a client sees that I have this camera that's big, like physically big, I mean, it looks like I'm more professional than I probably am.
It's so true. I started a freelance photography business coming right out of college, and I like mustered together a couple of clients, and then I'd go, today technology is easier, so I'd like rent all these other cameras. I had a nice one, but I'd rent like these other lenses that show up with this, huge satchel of like lenses and things, and people would never question. I think that you make a good point, because I think a lot of times there's this misconception that you have to have all the know-how, you have to be at a certain point in your life before you can go get started. And sometimes it's just a matter of like, if you look the part, you have, the initiative and maybe some know-how, and you can convince somebody to give you a shot.
All you have to be is slightly better than the person who's paying you for it at doing whatever it is that they're paying you for. So I want to be clear, simultaneously, it's funny in hindsight, simultaneously, I really had no idea what I was doing with video production or video editing. Like I didn't know how to do fancy effects or anything, or I probably still to this day don't really know anything about sound production or proper lighting for interviews or stuff. Like when I would go in and film like a sit down interview, if I was working with someone and I needed to have a couple like, person talking to camera, I would basically just like turn random lights off, move them around, open the shade up and down until I got some sort of shadow effect that looked
good enough.
That like looked somewhat dramatic, but I had absolutely no idea what the principles were behind it. I was like, let's move you, 45 degrees this way. Let's move you 30 degrees that way. I'm going to try turning this light on, this light off. I truly had no idea what in the F I was doing. And I would just keep moving them around until the lighting looked dramatic enough that I was like, okay, this is cinematic, right? So I simultaneously had no idea what I was doing. And yet to build a marketing services company, in hindsight, I had to have at least one hard skill set to build off of. Because I see a lot of like young entrepreneurs, it's they want to start something. They want to be a small business owner. They want to be an entrepreneur. They've seen some videos from Gary Vee or whatever, and they're like psyched to like start something. And that's awesome. It's easy to start a business. I mean, all you really have to do to start a business now is tell people I'm a small business owner. Yeah. It's not like an official piece of paper that proves it. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I still to this day don't have business cards. Like we have a multi-million-dollar company, 20 employees scattered across the US and even some overseas as well. I don't have a business card. I recently went to a real estate conference just last week in Las Vegas. And I'm like talking with some other founders of companies in the trade show area. And, we'd have a conversation. They're like, oh, so what's your card? And I'm like, I don't have cards. Like it just never occurred to me to print business cards. Right.
Yeah.
So it's easy to get started. But I think the trend I see amongst a lot of young people is that they think just wanting to start a small business is enough to go get clients and enough to create traction. And it's not. You have to have at least like some specific skill set that you can then build off of, where that's the thing that people will rationalize hiring you for. And then of course you can cross-sell all sorts of other add-on services and whatnot as your skill set grows. But had I been a marketer, to put this in really straightforward terms, if I said, I'm a marketer, hire my marketing company, and someone says, well, what do you do? Why should I hire you? And if I just said, well, I do marketing, it's like, well, what does that mean?
It's in the name, right? Obviously. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, how are you going to help me grow my business? Are you an expert on, direct mail? Do you know Google ads, pay-per-click, Facebook ads? Do you do website design? Are you a graphic designer? Do you do referral marketing where you have tons of strategies to like help me extract more business from my existing database? Do you do billboards? Do you help me write TV ads, radio ads? I mean, when you say you do marketing, what does that mean? And as a young person, I was trying to learn as much about all of the above as I could. But in hindsight, I probably didn't realize it at the time. But in hindsight, what got me a bunch of those early gigs was the fact that, oh yeah, we'll pay you $500 to film a quick video. And then they were impressed enough by the video. And when they talked to me like in person for 5 or 10 minutes, they realized like, oh, wow, this kid actually knows a lot more about business strategy than just, filming a quick video. Like maybe we should engage him further with the services because it seems like he knows what he's talking about. Because in the meantime, I had read, every marketing book I could get my hands on, I would buy and read. And so I knew everything there was to know about, headlines and copywriting and upsell strategies and all the above. So it often happened when people met me that they're like, oh, okay, wow, we thought you were kind of just a local video guy who would come and hit record and film this video. But, it clearly like you can have an intelligent conversation about business and marketing. And that's what led to getting me more clients. And so if I was ever advising a young person today, if they want to be an entrepreneur or start a small business or something, ironically, what I'd actually say is go get a skill first.
Yeah.
And then go build a business off of that. So whether your skill is photography, video production, maybe it's like web design, maybe you're like a WordPress expert, how to do web design, maybe it's software development, whatever that is, you have to have some sort of specific skill set that you start with, and then you can build an entire company off of that. But it's really, really hard to start a service-based business anyways, if you don't have at least one specific tangible skill set that people can start hiring you for, and that builds the momentum for the business. Like my sister is actually a really good example. She has become really good at photography. She's not just one of those kids who bought a DSLR and calls herself a photographer, right? Like that's how she started.
That's how every photographer starts.
Yeah, right. But like she's actually gotten really good at like lighting and composition and understands how to like manipulate different lenses versus the time of the day with the lighting and everything. And she now charges a lot for weddings and will do other photography, portrait photography. And like she's gotten really good at it. And she's hired experts and mentors to teach her how to create more epic photos. So when you look at one of her, images compared to other photographers in the area, you can objectively tell, oh, she's better than them.
Yeah.
And it's not just that she has a nicer camera, it's that it's the wizard, not the wand type thing. Like she actually really knows what she's doing with lighting and composition and everything. And so if she wanted to, she also then could go probably start a marketing agency because she now has a book of business and clientele that trust her with photography. And then that would be pretty easy to say, hey, let's use these images if it's a business, assuming, right? Yeah. Let's use these images I took for you and let's create some social media ad campaigns, or, let's put them on your website. I can design your website and we'll use these images, or I can make Instagram ad campaigns or Facebook ad campaigns using these images. And now she could probably find some businesses that, who knows, they'll pay her $500 a month, $1,000 a month on a retainer to manage their digital marketing. But it started with the fact that they paid her, whatever, $500 to take professional photos.
Yeah.
But if she didn't have that skill set, no business in their right mind is going to hire someone just to do marketing for them.
You can't
with something more tangible.
Yeah. You can't carve out that niche without the skill. And in order to carve out the niche, you have to have some foundation to build upon. Like for you early on, it was like, I have this thing. I don't really know how valuable it is. I see an opportunity, and it turned out to be a really cool outcome, like with your first realtor. But it didn't become a niche until it's like, okay, well, multiple people in this same thing have this need. I have a skill that solves the problem for this group of people. And now you have an actual business strategy, whether you sit down and planned it or not. You have some way to differentiate yourself to the specific people who have a need for what you're doing and can offer, instead of just being the kid who's like, I can do marketing for anybody who can, who's going to give me a paycheck. It's like, exactly. No, I can do videos for realtors, and here's the outcome I can help them produce.
The more niche it is, the more people will want to work with you and the higher prices you can charge. Because if I just say that, hey, I'm a generic local marketing office. Because when I was 18, 19, 20, I was thinking like, how cool would it be to make enough money to lease a little office space and have my logo in the window when I walk in every day, like I'm Don Draper walking into my Mad Men ad agency.
Yeah.
I just thought, how cool would it be to have an actual physical office that clients could come visit me in, and I'd wear a suit every day and I'd have business cards. I just was thinking like, that will make me feel legit. But if you're just the generic local marketing office that'll take on any client in any industry, there's not a lot of pricing power there, because people don't really view you as an expert as much as just like, oh, that's a marketing company that if I need something done fairly generic, I'm sure they could do it for me. Versus if I say, hey, we are a marketing agency that specializes in working with realtors. And above and beyond that, we kind of specialize in working with realtors in small towns and medium-sized towns. So we tell people that, like, if you're in like Manhattan, or you're in like, trying to sell condos in Atlanta or San Francisco or LA or some really big city, like I tell people, that's not really our wheelhouse. But if you're in a small to medium-sized town and you're a realtor, that's what we specialize in. And you probably will not talk to someone in the entire United States of America that's better at this than what we are. Because I grew up in a small town. The people I've hired predominantly come from small towns. We understand the cultural dynamics of small town America. And yet we also combine that with a modern skill set of knowing how Google PPC works, Facebook ads, Instagram, YouTube, and copywriting. And so when you combine that, that's a really, really powerful skill set that, like, hey, if you're a realtor in a small town, there's literally no one else in the country that's as good at this as what we do. So if you can make that claim in whatever it is industry you're in, it's that specific that it's not just that we work with realtors, right? And it's not just that we do Facebook ads, it's that we do social media ads for real estate agents in small towns. So if this describes you, there's no one better to talk to. That gives us pricing power that's incredible, because a lot of companies might charge $500 a month, $1,000 a month. We charge $1,600 a month because of the results that we get people, because it is so niche. Yeah. Right. So whatever, if you're starting a service business, or even frankly, if it's a product business, you got to get clear on who is the real niche customer of the thing you're making, the widget you're making, or the service that you have. If I were to ever start another professional services company, whether it's a, law firm, accounting, something like that, I would really try to find who is the niche that we can serve.
Yeah.
Right. Not just anyone. It's like if I was a plumber, even, and I started a plumbing business, I wouldn't want to just say, hey, we work with anyone whose toilet's clogged will be there. Right?
It's a lot of people. Yeah.
I would want to say, like, we specialize in working with businesses, for example.
Yeah.
So if you're a small business and you have problems with plumbing, whether it's leaky sinks, faucets, toilets, whatever, call us. We specialize in working with businesses. I would try to figure out some unique angle or niche that we could dominate, where people know, hey, if you own a business and you have an issue with plumbing, here's who you call. That company specializes in it. Because that gives you the ability to charge typically an extra 10, 20%, sometimes even 30% more than the competition. And if you know anything about margins for professional service companies, they typically are 10% or so, or maybe if you're really good, you have a 20% margin. So if you can find a way to increase your prices or your margin from being 10 to 20%, that doesn't sound like a lot to the layperson, but it actually means your business is twice as profitable as your competitors, just by going obviously from 10 to 20. And you can do that by specializing. I mean, I can tell you from experience, it's a lot more fun running a business when your profit margin is 20% or 25% than when it's 5 or 10.
Absolutely.
For the first couple of years of our business, that's what the margin was. It was in the single digits, and that's hard.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're the young person out there who's like, I don't want to start my own business. I've latched onto the hustle porn that's out there. That's like, if I just go out there and hustle, it's going to work out. Like, pay my, take a note and pay attention to this idea of, it's not just enough that you can take the initiative. Like, you got to find the market, attach that there's a sweet spot of the market, the skill set you have, the timing, who's out there. You can't just be like showing up like every other marketer or whatever your skill set or service you're going to provide. You got to have some differentiating factor and figure out who actually cares what you want.
Pick an industry and dominate it. Even if you're an employee and you don't really care about being an entrepreneur, you don't want to start a small business, that's totally fine. It's not for everyone.
Yeah.
So I'm actually not one of those people who thinks that, hey, everyone should be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship is always the best way. Yeah. And if you're an employee, you're just a wage slave to some entrepreneur. Yeah. That one quote about, either you build your own dream or you go to work every day helping someone else build their dream. I think that's such horse shit.
Yeah.
There's tons of risk in entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
It's not for everyone.
No, some people could not sleep at night.
No. Yeah. The best risk-adjusted return in your career, absolutely without question, is being an employee. The best risk-adjusted return. So the best way to do it is to become a highly valued employee with a specific skill set, and especially if that specific skill set is in a specific industry, where people know that, hey, you're not just, I'll just use being a photographer as an example. You're not just a great photographer, you're a great photographer with a deep knowledge of conference or event photography, or a deep knowledge of rodeo photography, to use a really weird example. It's what if you built a national reputation that for whatever reason, you just understand the ins and outs of rodeo, and you know where to position yourself to get the best shots and what lighting to use and settings, where your photos when you're covering rodeos are just so epic and noticeably better than other random photographers, that word spreads around amongst the highest circles of the rodeo industry in America, of all the bull riders and bronc riders and team ropers and all that, hey, if you want to have epic photos of your rodeo so you have great content to then share on social media afterwards and everything, you should hire Tim Chermak. He really knows rodeo photography. I would have way more leverage in that situation than if they're hey, I know this guy, he's a pretty good photographer, he does weddings.
He takes pictures of stuff.
Yeah. But if people know that you have specific expertise in that industry, what I think a lot of people don't realize is the networks of connections in most industries and most business groups are much smaller than people realize. The good old boys club, that phrase exists for a reason. It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So if you impress just a couple people, typically word spreads very quickly in an industry that you're really good at what you do. The problem is most people don't have the courage to specialize in a specific industry. So if I were a photographer, right? That is exactly what I would do. I would try to identify something so weirdly niche, like I specialize in rodeo photography, so weirdly niche that it almost sounds weird when you explain it to other people. They're like, really? That's it? Because most people don't realize how deep you can go and still make pretty good money. Because if a rodeo is willing to pay you $1,000 or a couple $1,000 to, do the photography for a weekend rodeo, they're probably also willing to pay you to, for example, manage their social media, run some ads, put those photos on their website. Maybe you do some video interviews while you're there with the bull riders and blah, blah, blah. And you maybe interview some, fans in the stands on why they go. It's very easy for that one job to cascade into a much more robust package that you sell them, because it's easier for them to deal with one person than to be working with 3 or 4 different contractors. And so I would pick something super niche like that.
Yeah. And the same principle though applies though, like what you're talking about. It applies regardless of whether you choose to venture out into the arena of entrepreneurship, you choose to be an employee. Like carving out your niche is what unlocks the opportunity to, one, having ridiculous financial upside, having a steady, flow of cool opportunities, but also being the person that people think of when they think of like this specific problem. Like you're not the IT guy among 10 million IT guys. You are the cybersecurity guy for hedge funds with over $1 billion in assets. Like, you have some kind of like type differentiation that makes your name be the thing people think of. And that same principle applies regardless of how you're building. It's not just, hey, I can hustle. I have a pulse. I can show up and I'll figure it out. It's, I already know how to do this specific thing and solve this specific problem. Your confidence in me should be much higher.
Whether you're a contractor, entrepreneur, or a W-2 employee somewhere, a lot of people forget how much time is wasted on just gathering the experience necessary to hit a certain level of institutional knowledge of whatever industry you're operating in, to where you know what anyone's talking about.
Yeah.
So like in marketing, this is a constant problem for most agencies, because most agencies take any client in any industry that's willing to pay them money, because they never, they're constantly at a shortage of clients, which is ironic that it's a marketing company, but that is most marketing companies, right?
Yeah.
They'll take anyone willing to hire them. So let's say that you're like an online school or a college somewhere, right? If you hire the typical marketing agency and they're going to manage some search ads for you on Google pay-per-click or some Facebook ads and basically help that college find new students, right? Yeah. If you've never worked with a client in higher ed before, you're probably going to waste the first 6 months of your engagement with that client just struggling to learn the lingo of the industry and what are the ratios? What should the cost per click be? What should the cost per lead, the cost per application be? How much are we spending to actually get a confirmed student from the ads? What are all the lingo that you're basically going to spend several months at least just trying to get up to speed on all of that institutional knowledge that you take for granted when you start working in an industry that you don't know anything about. So imagine now that you do that once and you do gain all that knowledge. Well, I would say, like, why would you then start working with some other client? Maybe it's a car dealership or a dentist or a big law firm or something. Like, don't spread yourself so thin that you're having to relearn all these industries. Go deep in that one industry, because now if you know enough about higher ed, it should be really easy to get another client in the higher ed space, assuming you're doing a good job for them and they're happy with the results they're getting. But now you have an expertise that you can say, hey, we're not just a Google PPC shop or a social media agency. We're a digital marketing agency that specializes in working with higher ed clients. We know the unique challenges and the most common mistakes that people make in marketing for higher ed. Like, we have deep experience in this specific arena. So on day one, we can actually have an intelligent conversation with you about where your business is at, because we understand your industry in addition to understanding digital marketing, right? So you might be at like a 90 out of 100 level of your expertise in digital marketing. And maybe in higher ed, you're only at a 50 out of 100, right? But I guarantee you that that company that hires you, maybe it's some online school across the country, right? Like, they'll be a lot happier talking with you as a digital marketing agency that actually speaks the language of higher ed and the college system and all that, than some random digital marketing agency that brags about how good they are, but they don't know anything about higher ed. Probably 10 times out of 10, they're going to hire you because they know that you already have knowledge of their industry. So that's true of an employee too. That's the point I'm making here, is that try to develop industry expertise alongside whatever expertise you have of the specific skill set. So if I knew that I was going to be an employee for the rest of my life, again, which is totally fine. I don't think everyone should be an entrepreneur. There's probably a ton of people listening to this that have no interest in being an entrepreneur. And that's awesome, right? It's like not everyone can be the head coach of the team, right? Like the stars are actually the wide receivers and the running backs and the quarterback and whatnot. It wouldn't work if everyone said, I want to be head coach, right? Yeah. So let's say you're an employee and you're listening to this. Get some specific experience. Let's say that you're interested in software dev, right? So you're learning all the various programming languages and you're just kind of getting your feet wet and trying to learn about doing software development. Well, guess what? Software development is not special anymore. It's not the year 1999, where if you're a software developer, you're going to make $1 million a year.
Yeah, they're pumping them out in 12 weeks at boot camps all over the world now.
Software dev is very quickly becoming the new accounting, where it's like, it's a great way to make 50 grand a year. Because unless you're, I'm serious, unless you are really, really good, in the next 10 years, mark my words, software dev will be a blue collar job. It'll be something that's
becoming very saturated. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not that it's not hard to do. So I'm not saying I disrespect software developers. It's extremely difficult to do, but so many people are becoming software developers now that it's just not a rare skill anymore. It's not what it was 5-10 years ago, where if you tell someone at a cocktail party, oh, I'm a software developer, that's basically slang for I make 6 figures a year.
Yeah. Well, there are plenty of starving attorneys and accountants nowadays too, because the same thing happened. It's like everybody went to law school and went and got their CPA, and that's what's happening now. And so it's inevitable.
Yeah, and overseas too, because most people feel less risk outsourcing software dev overseas than they would outsourcing law or accounting overseas, because there's less proprietary private details. So someone might not outsource their legal needs to India or the Philippines or something, or their accounting, because they don't I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but people maybe don't want a call center in the Philippines or in India or in Vietnam or something to have access to their accounting. They're like, well, yeah, we know they're willing to work for $5 an hour, but we're just going to hire these Americans and pay them 50, 60 grand a year, because it just helps us sleep better at night, knowing that our data isn't halfway around the world. Right.
Yeah.
And that is what it is. Right. People don't really have that risk or they don't feel or experience that risk when it comes to software dev. If they find out that to hire an American costs 120 grand a year, you could get someone who's just as good in Eastern Europe or in East Asia for 30 grand a year. They're going to take the 30 grand a year every time.
Absolutely.
So when you look at being a software developer, the point I'm making with all this is that it's not enough anymore to just say I'm a software developer and then think that somehow guarantees you a 100K or 150K job. What you will need to do in the future, this is true of any job, but I'm just using this as an example. You'll have to develop the expertise as an elite software developer, but you also should develop expertise in a specific industry or use case, and then maybe build a blog around that, where you develop the reputation that hey, if you need dev work done in higher ed, or if you need dev work done for building mobile app CRMs, or if you need dev work done in, the agricultural industry, because maybe you've made a bunch of connections. My family is pretty involved in the poultry industry in Minnesota, but maybe you're in the hog industry, or maybe you work in crop farming. A lot of people, who grow corn or soybeans or something. And you also know software dev and let's say website design or something, all of a sudden that's becoming pretty niche.
Yep.
There's not a lot of people that own big ag companies, or this is a random niche we have a bunch of clients in right now, just randomly, vacuum stores. I didn't even know vacuum stores were a thing.
I didn't even know that.
Marketing agency, but there's still retail stores that specialize in brick and mortar retail stores that specialize in selling vacuum cleaners, high-end vacuum cleaners, not the junk you buy at Walmart for $100 that breaks after 2 years and you have to go buy a new one. Vacuums that are $800, $1,000 that have actual motors in them and they use bags. They're not bagless, because bag vacuums clean better than a bagless. You can tell I know what I'm talking about because I've written marketing copy for all these vacuums, right? This is what professionals use if they're buying a vacuum for their business that really needs to do a good job. These vacuums can last 10 to 20 years.
Yeah. So
it costs a lot more, but also not really, because it'll last 10, 15, 20 years, where most people are buying a new vacuum cleaner often every 2 to 3 years.
But so that's a good point though you make. So vacuum cleaner bags or vacuum cleaner stores. Nobody knows they exist, or you wouldn't think about it.
I did.
Not a sexy market, not something like, when you're thinking about traditional impressions of entrepreneurs today, especially among younger generations, it's like,
I work in software consulting, or I
$1 billion
work in private equity, or
IPO. Like, I have a clean website, but it's not only, the end users of those products that have a need to be filled. There are also all these other overlooked industries where I would say increasingly so, it's the overlooked industries where there's, incredible upside if you can figure out how to take this skill from another market and go reach this underserved market. And go help these people who don't have somebody building a market for their needs.
Yeah. I mean, we, obviously we had expertise in doing local social media ads for small businesses. And that's kind of a more generic skill. Like, how to use Facebook Ads Manager, Business Manager, how to do Google pay-per-click, whatever, YouTube ads. But we started working with this vacuum store client, and we helped them grow their business by like 30, 40%, which is a huge deal. Like, a small business owner growing even by 30% changes their life, And so naturally he told a buddy who owned a vacuum store 100 miles away, hey, you've got to hire Tim at his company. They're getting the amazing results. We got them amazing results too. Guess what? They referred us someone. And now word starts spreading. And this is funny, even me saying this out loud, but there's like forums online for vacuum store owners. It's like a niche where like they all know each other, because there's not like tens of thousands of them. There's really just a couple hundred of them, or maybe not a couple hundred. Maybe there's 1,000 across the entire US. I don't know. It's not a big industry though. Like retail, brick and mortar, vacuum stores, right? And so word started spreading that we know what we're doing. And all of a sudden we have half a dozen vacuum stores that are working with us, and more trying to hire us. And we can't even keep up with the demand because they're like, hey, this is a cool marketing company. They're getting results. And now they actually speak our language. Yeah. Like, we understand the margins and how to sell, what the common FAQs customers have. So like, they don't have to go over all that with us when they sign up, like they would if they hired some random other marketing company that doesn't know anything about vacuum stores. Right. So if you're an employee, pick a niche and a tangible skill set. So if I was a software developer, I'd want to be a software developer that has specific skill sets, maybe even in working with cities. That's one, like, you really understand local government and their website needs and their software development needs. Because maybe you got a job working for your local city and you just realized, wow, their data is a mess. None of the different softwares are communicating with each other. I'm going to work on developing some sort of CRM or chat platform or communications software that makes a local government more efficient and more streamlined. Like, that's super, super niche, right? Yeah. Or maybe you do marketing for local Christian schools, right? And you develop a reputation of like, hey, I don't do marketing for public schools. I don't do marketing for colleges. I do marketing for local K-8 Christian schools, like the kind of schools that, local Christian conservative parents might send their kids to, so they don't have to go to public school K-8. I'm going to do marketing for those schools because I'm going to understand that psychology and that demographic so well that I can write really good ad copy. I know what the types of questions people are asking. I know maybe a little bit about the margins of the industry, so I can have an intelligent conversation with the client about like the actual business outcomes. Yeah. Because that's that's something that when people hire a marketing agency, I know they kind of think that we're just a bunch of nerds that all we talk about is how many likes did that post get, or how many shares did that video have, or whatever, or what's the open rate on the email. But if you can prove that you're also capable of having a higher level business conversation with the person who hires you, it's really easy to win business because there's not a lot of people in their life that they feel comfortable talking about that stuff with. So if you have chops of the actual marketing thing they're hiring you for, and you can add value at kind of a business strategy level, it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy to get clients. All that applies to being an employee though, too. Absolutely. Try to develop expertise in some specific niche industry. And not only will you never want for a job, but it gives you all sorts of leverage in negotiating pay raises and promotions with your employer, because they know that you're highly sought after in the industry. So if you're at some job and you're making, 50 grand a year and you're like, I'd really like to be making closer to 70 or 75. If you develop an industry blog and all of a sudden in your industry, people start respecting you and listening to you, and maybe even you give a couple talks at small conferences because you start to develop some sort of expertise in the industry, like whatever industry you're in, right? This applies to anything. Yep. Even if you were a teacher, this could be true, because let's say you're a teacher and you develop a reputation of, wow, that person is just an expert motivator of fifth graders. Like he's just so, or she's so good, or he's so good.
Now you can go write a book.
Yeah. I mean, like
do anything.
Yeah. And even if you were at a public school, you could probably negotiate a higher pay raise if it's like, hey, I'm a thought leader in the industry. Like I really know teaching. Or if the public school, maybe because of some union contract, won't pay you more, I bet it'll be easy to find a private school that's willing to pay you 70 if your current job is 50 or whatever those numbers are, right? A lot of people don't realize, maybe they intellectually get it, but they forget that all of the freedom in your career is a function of your expertise. So
absolutely.
The degree of freedom you experience and being able to work remotely or ask for a pay raise or have more favorable work-life balance of, I'm not going to work on Mondays, or I'm not going to work on Fridays, or, you just tell your colleagues like, hey, I don't take unscheduled calls. So if you ever want to get a hold of me, here's my calendar type thing. A lot of people can't get away with that because they don't have expertise. So this is something that, even way back when, Tim Ferriss talked about this in the 4-Hour Workweek of like, set up autoresponders and batch your email responses and make it hard to get a hold of. And I think the one thing maybe he didn't devote enough time to is that only works to kind of play hard to get in your career. Because let's just call it what it is. You're playing hard to get. That only works if you already have a reputation of being really, really good at what you do. So people feel like, well, yeah, that's just the cost of working with Mitchell, or that's just the cost of working with Tim. If you want to work with Tim, he might take 48 hours to get back to your email, or he might refuse to talk to you on weekends or after 4:30 p.m. or whatever. But that's the price you pay to work with someone who's really, really good at what they do and specializes in your industry. So they all of a sudden have to plan their calendar around yours, not the other way around. That's true of an employee too. Like employees do not realize the leverage that they could have, especially if they gain institutional knowledge in the industry they're in. Because if that business lost you, that's a devastating blow if they now have to go from not just losing an employee to hiring a new one, but losing an employee who's like highly sought after, expert into the industry, and then replacing them with someone who doesn't know anything. It gives you all sorts of negotiating leverage.
Yeah. This is incredible advice. If you are a young adult out there in the real world, you're struggling with how to maneuver, navigate through your career, heed this advice. Find your niche, whether you want to be an employee, whether you want to be an entrepreneur, heed this advice. Figure out, some way that you can lean in and double down on a skill set in an industry, gain that institutional knowledge, and increase your leverage. Tim, any closing thoughts, final words of advice to, your average young adult who's, whether they're entrepreneurial or an employee, like early on in their career?
There are riches in niches, and the deeper you go into a niche, the more freedom you'll have in your life in terms of work-life balance, and the more money that you can make. My litmus test is that it should be almost weird if you describe the niche that you work in to other people, where they almost have like a quizzical look on their face when you tell them how niche your career is, or how niche your company is if you're an entrepreneur, right? Like I'm a photographer that specializes in rodeos. Or I'm a software developer that specializes in hog farms. Or, I have a software developer friend who's building an app now for the pizza industry, like Domino's pizza franchises. So he's now developed deep expertise in franchises. So he can basically say, I'm a software developer that has deep expertise in franchise data. And so he's basically building software that helps automate what a lot of these franchise owners were using just Excel spreadsheets for. And it was a mess of spreadsheets and different files and everything. So he has expertise in that. Like, it's weird, right? Like that's a really weird niche. So when you describe your career niche to someone, whether it's you started a business, like, hey, I do Facebook ads for small town realtors. That's weird, right? The niche is so odd that you almost assume like, wow, that's really small. Are you even making any money at that?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. The more niche you get, the more money you can charge. So you actually need fewer clients to make a bunch of money. The same thing is true in your career. So even if you're an employee, learn as much as you can about the industry you're in, because eventually that will actually become more important than the skill set itself.
Yeah. Awesome. Tim, thanks so much for joining us today. For all our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Self-Directed Podcast. Leave us a review if you're on Apple. If you're on your other favorite podcast platforms, feel free to hit us up at email. Drop us a comment if you're on YouTube, and we'll be back again soon with another episode.